The way Trump talked to Zelensky in the Oval Office last week is the way Trump talks to anyone who Trump perceives as weaker than he is. But Zelensky isn't weaker than Trump. In fact, thanks to last week's showdown in the Oval Office, new polling shows Zelensky more popular than ever. His approval rating jumped 10 percentage points in the past week. It's at 68%. Trump right now has envoys in Ukraine who are trying to find opposition leaders to run against Zelensky in the next election. Good luck with that, Donald. Trump made Zelensky more popular than ever. You might remember Trump has called Zelensky a dictator because Ukraine's now going on 6 years since they held a presidential election. After the Russian invasion, Zelensky declared martial law, and now Trump is claiming that makes him an illegitimate leader who must hold elections. Well, I don't think Trump is going to want elections in Ukraine now. He just got Zelensky reelected. And more importantly, Donald Trump doesn't understand what weakness is. You want to see real weakness, Donald Trump? Look in the mirror. Look at the people you surround yourself with. Donald Trump thinks Canada is weaker than the United States because America's economy and military are larger. That's like saying Stephen Chung, his press spokesman, is healthier than I am because he's larger and wealthier than I am. Canada wouldn't dream of becoming our 51st state. Canadians live on average 4 years longer than Americans. Canada is a better place to live than the United States. How do I know that? Because last year, only 4,000 Canadians died from firearms, while the number one cause of death for children here in the United States, guns. A bigger military and a larger economy doesn't make a country stronger, especially when all that strength, power, and money is concentrated in the hands of 4 or 5 families. Half this country can't come up with $500 for an emergency. Trump thinks he holds all the cards, and you know what? He does, because Canada and Zelensky aren't stupid enough to play the game Trump's playing. You hold all the cards, Donald. Keep them. Keep those cards. Eric Trump announced the Trump Organization is suing Capital One for debanking. In the lawsuit, Eric claims Capital One unjustly and unfairly fired the Trump Organization as a client in the immediate aftermath of January 6, 2021. Nearly 300 bank accounts belonging to members of the Trump family were closed. And people like Melania and Barron were told, "We don't want your business." Eric Trump, after filing the lawsuit, gave an interview on Fox News calling it, quote, an egregious nature of canceling based on political bias. He says he's suing Capital One for canceling their accounts, saying it was political bias. Political bias? You mean bias towards democracy? Your father literally ordered an insurrection. That's not political bias. Corporations are free to pick and choose their clients. And corporations by law are forbidden from doing business with terrorist organizations or insurrectionists like your father, who is an insurrectionist. So the problem, Eric Trump, isn't debanking. The problem is defrauding. In case you forgot, your company defrauded DeBank. It's why the Trump Organization now owes the state of New York $500 million. A year ago, a judge ruled that the Trump Organization defrauded lenders in order to secure favorable interest rates. It's incredible, Eric Trump, you were able to get a bank account with Capital One in the first place, given how you've defrauded every bank you've ever done business with. But I get it. Your dad somehow became president, and things have obviously changed. Things changed. He got back into the Oval Office. But I'll tell you one thing that hasn't changed, Eric Trump. Your father is a two-bit mobster who defrauded lenders and launched an insurrection on January 6. His being in the Oval Office won't change that. He's still a mobster who launched an insurrection on January 6. And Capital One, who you're suing, was well within its rights to fire him and you as clients. But I have no doubt Capital One will settle with the Trump Organization. I have no doubt Capital One will cut a check for tens of millions of dollars to Donald Trump, the way Disney, Twitter, and Facebook, and probably CBS will do. They're all doing it, settling Trump's frivolous lawsuits filed against them. And Trump gets them to settle because he's back in the Oval Office. And the president controls, to some degree, all the commissions and agencies that regulate these businesses. There are rumors that Donald Trump Jr. is considering running for president in 2028. You know, on second thought, maybe a third term for his father wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. Well, Donald Trump Jr. has expressed interest in becoming president after being told it's the only job in the White House that doesn't require a drug test. If you want to work in the White House, they test you for drugs. It's interesting that Donald Trump Jr. hasn't taken a job inside the White House. Never. Not during the first term, not in the second term. And he's so close. I mean, he really is. I mean, he picked J.D. Vance. And yet Don Jr. won't take a job in the White House. I wonder why. Is it because in order to pass an FBI security check, you need to submit to a urine test? Nah. No, I don't think that's the reason. I think Donald Trump Jr. is his own man. And Donald Trump Jr. would never take a job in the White House because then everyone would know the only reason he was hired is because of who his father is. And Donald Trump Jr. has always been about making it on his own. He would pass a urine test. It's his pride. That's why he's not working in the White House. The United States government faces a shutdown next Friday. There is now talk that Mike Johnson, the Speaker, wants to extend the continuing resolution all the way until October 1st. That would mean spending levels for 2025 would be identical to 2024. So there's a lot of bluster, a lot of lives being ruined, but very little accomplished. In fact, nothing is being accomplished other than destroying lives. Meanwhile, Mike Johnson is warning Republicans to avoid town halls. Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, who represents a purple district in upstate New York, was booed earlier this week when he told a crowd of 3,000 constituents that he voted for the latest budget bill, which calls for hundreds of billions of dollars slashed from Medicaid. He said he voted for it because our country is $36 trillion in debt. And for some reason, slashing Medicaid while giving the rich a $4 to $6 trillion tax cut, that's in the bill he voted for some reason that isn't playing well with constituents. It's happening all over the country. Republican members of Congress holding town halls and their constituents, the people who voted for them, not happy, and they're letting them know. So, Speaker Mike Johnson's solution? Stop listening to your constituents. Johnson is telling members of the Republican caucus, stop holding town hall meetings. Johnson, like Donald Trump, is accusing paid protesters of, quote unquote, ambushing well-meaning Republican members of Congress who are holding town halls. Yes, they're well-meaning Republican members of Congress who simply want to cut taxes for the rich on the backs of the working poor. Johnson said, he went on Fox News, our speaker said, quote, we have Republicans who want to go out and be among their constituents. Sure they do. And hear their concerns and dialogue with them. It's a big part of the job, but the problem is they're being ambushed right now in some cases by paid protesters. It's walking into an ambush, unquote. Really expressing concern to your member of Congress is an ambush. This is why Republicans are fascists. This is why they have no choice but to be fascist. Democracy can't possibly work for them because the people would never vote for the crap they're offering. It's why they gerrymander and, more importantly, suppress the vote of chronically marginalized communities. Did Trump win in November? I guess so. But he won because Republicans know how to suppress the vote. They know how to keep marginalized communities from being allowed to vote, and they know how to spend millions subverting the electoral process by targeting low information voters with lies. And never forget, for almost nearly half the voters in this country, white supremacy, Christian nationalism is more important than being able to pay their bills, which is why the National Republican Congressional Committee accused Democratic Congressman Adriano Espaillat of being an illegal immigrant. Congressman Espaillat, who's been on this show, he's congressman from around Harlem, Upper Manhattan. Congressman Espaillat delivered the Spanish-speaking response to Trump's ridiculous address before Congress on Tuesday. So what was the GOP's response to Congressman Espaillat's response? He's an illegal alien. That's what they said. Congressman Espaillat is a U.S. citizen. He's been one for 60 years. His family came from the Dominican Republic. They arrived on a tourist visa. They obtained green cards, and eventually they all became citizens. But the official statement from the National Republican Congressional Committee, this is Mike Johnson's re-election campaign for Congress, the National Republican Congressional Committee. Their response to Congressman Espaillat's speech is, quote, Democrats literally chose an illegal immigrant to give their response to President Trump's address, unquote. Literally. They said, literally chose an illegal immigrant. Those are the words of the National Republican Congressional Committee. Literally, those are the words. That's Mike Johnson's political committee. Literally. House Republican Carlos Gimenez of Florida telling the Washington Post, well, that's not a term I would have used for a sitting member of Congress. Why don't you quit the Republican Party, Carlos? Literally. New Mexico's chief medical examiner says actor Gene Hackman died from heart disease. Hackman was 95. And it wasn't until last year that I realized he was the blind man in Young Frankenstein. When is the last time you watched Young Frankenstein? Gene Hackman is a miracle, and so is Young Frankenstein. I know people are stressed out. Go watch Young Frankenstein. Just go watch Gene Hackman in Young Frankenstein, and you'll feel great. The medical examiner says Hackman's wife died from hantavirus, they say, which is spread by rodents. Speaking of rodents, let's talk about Bobby Kennedy Jr. That measles outbreak in Texas and New Mexico is growing, with more than 200 people coming down with a disease we eradicated 25 years ago, but is back because of Bobby Kennedy Jr. New Mexico reporting an unvaccinated adult male has now died from the measles, unvaccinated. But the new head of Health and Human Services, Bobby Kennedy Jr., says getting the measles vaccine is a personal decision. That's what he said amid this measles outbreak, that getting the measles vaccine is a personal decision. So is driving 200 miles per hour down the Grand Corniche with your eyes closed. That's a personal decision, too. You're going to kill a lot of people along the way, but it's a personal decision, Bobby. That adult male who died is now the second person to have been killed by the measles outbreak, which began in Western Texas. Western Texas, one of the most unvaccinated areas in the country. Bobby Kennedy calls this measles outbreak, quote, not unusual. Kennedy in the White House on Wednesday said, "We have measles outbreaks every year." No. Measles was eradicated 25 years ago. And then anti-vaxxers like Bobby Kennedy Jr. convinced enough Americans not to get their shots, so it came back. Measles outbreaks are highly unusual, Bobby Kennedy. The first one to die in this outbreak was an unvaccinated child in Texas. Thank you, Bobby Kennedy Jr. This is why your entire family hates you, including your wife. As the Department of Government Efficiency makes cuts across the board, Bobby Kennedy Jr. has ordered the Centers for Disease Control to begin a massive study into links between autism and vaccines. There already are mountains of studies proving there's no link. But let's waste money. Why don't we waste money we don't have? Why don't we do a study on the connection between gun deaths and bullets? Maybe, you think maybe let's spend billions to study that. Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican doctor, slammed the table and called such a study a massive waste of money. He called the study that Bobby Kennedy just started a massive waste of money. Dr. Cassidy, the Republican senator from Louisiana, said, "The subject has been studied exhaustively," unquote. He said, "There is no link between vaccines and autism. And by spending more money that we don't have on more studies opens the door for some parents to believe there might be a link between autism and vaccines." Is there a link between tobacco and cancer? Or should we do more studies? During Kennedy's hearings, Dr. Cassidy, Republican, asked Kennedy if he would like to apologize for spreading lies about the links between autism and vaccines. Bobby Kennedy Jr. said, "Well, I would apologize once I saw the evidence that I'm wrong." Dr. Cassidy said, "Here, I have the evidence." And he held up mountains of evidence. "Would you like to review it?" And Kennedy said, "No." And he wasn't going to apologize. Dr. Cassidy, Republican, voted to confirm Bobby Kennedy Jr. anyway, a doctor. Cassidy is a Republican doctor. First do no harm, doctor. You voted for Bobby Kennedy Jr. Now, we know that Tom Tillis, according to Vanity Fair, was going to vote against Hegseth, but the death threats got too much for him. What did they drop on your desk, Dr. Bill Cassidy? What was in the manila envelope that they dropped on your desk to get you to vote for Bobby Kennedy Jr. as head of Health and Human Services?